The night my face went viral, the only eyes I wanted in the room never showed up. Stage lights burned against my skin as I stood alone at the podium, my professional smile held in place, while cameras clicked like distant thunder. The Westbrook Hotel ballroom glittered in golden glass, 300 people in designer suits leaning forward to hear the story of gray media. But when I glanced at the front row, 5 empty seats stared back at me, each with a neat white card. Mom, Dad, Everest, Aunt Patty, Uncle Frank. I had written their names anyway, like some stubborn part of me still believed this time would be different. Miss Gray, a reporter, called from the front row, his notebook already half-filled. Who inspired you to start your company? The question landed like a punch. My throat tightened. I reached for the water glass, letting the cool crystal steady my shaking fingers while the room waited. 200 industry insiders, investors, journalists, people who had flown across the country for this launch, all hanging on my answer. I could have lied. I could have said some polished line about innovation and market gaps, about branding and opportunity. Instead, I glanced one last time at the empty chairs and heard my own voice come out softer than I intended. Maybe I said it came from knowing what it feels like to be forgotten. The ballroom fell silent in that instant, as if someone had pressed mute. Cameras clicked faster, hungry for the crack in my carefully constructed image. I did not cry. I have not cried in front of my family since I was a child, learning the first rule of the Gray household: tears accomplish nothing. But inside a door I had been holding shut for years creaked open, and the past slipped through. I was 12 the first time I held a microphone. Not the sleek, expensive kind that now hangs in every studio I own, but a cheap plastic toy I bought with 3 weeks of allowance. It had a cord that connected to nothing, a hollow body that distorted my voice into a tinny echo. To anyone else, it was junk. To me, it was possibility. I sat cross-legged on my bedroom floor, stuffed animals lined in neat little rows like an imaginary audience. I cleared my throat, lowered my voice the way I had heard news anchors do, and whispered, "And in breaking news, this is Soraya Gray reporting that dreams come true if you work hard enough." Downstairs, the living room erupted with noise. My father's booming shout thundered up through the floorboards. "Did you see that catch? That's my boy. That's a Gray man right there." Football highlights. Again, Everest's sophomore year game against Central High played on a loop so often I knew the commentary by heart. Each replay was a hymn, each slow motion catch a prayer. I raised my toy microphone closer and spoke louder, determined to finish my imaginary broadcast, but the bedroom door opened a crack. My mother's face appeared in the sliver of light, her finger pressed to her lips. "Honey, could you quiet down?" she whispered. "Your brother's highlights are on and your father is trying to focus." I remember the way my protest died halfway out of my mouth, but I started, and she cut me off with a soft smile that never reached her eyes. "I know, sweetie. Maybe later, okay. You know how important these game films are." Then the door closed with a gentle click that sounded to my 12-year-old ears like a lock sliding into place. Later never came. Not that night, not the next, not ever. In our house, Everest's games, Everest's trophies, Everest's future were the planets our family orbited. Everything else was background noise. Years later, I can still hear my father's voice the day I asked why he never came to my school speech competition. He ruffled my hair like I was still 5 and said, "A son carries the Gray family name Soraya. Your brother has real pressure on him. You're the lucky one. Lucky." I roll that word around even now, standing under the hotel chandeliers, feeling the echo of that old ache. Lucky to be overlooked. Lucky to be the child expected to understand. While Everest demanded, I absorbed. While Everest shone under stadium lights, I learned to dream in the dark. So I adapted. I learned to record in whispers, to talk into that toy microphone long after the plastic cracked and the batteries died. My initials SG carved into the base with a safety pin. I imagined listeners somewhere out there, people who leaned in, because they wanted to hear what I had to say. I made myself a promise no one heard. If I became exceptional enough, if I achieved enough, they would have to notice. The Gray household would be forced to see the daughter, who never made the highlight reels. That promise carried me to the day I spread college brochures across our kitchen table, a red circle drawn around Northwestern's journalism program. "Dad, I want to apply here," I said, heart-thudding. "They have one of the best broadcasting programs in the country." He barely glanced up from his coffee. "That will not put food on the table, sweetheart. What about something practical business, maybe?" My mother nodded, patting my hand as if I were being silly. "Those communication degrees are hobbies, really," she added. "Maybe something more practical, honey." I applied anyway. I got in with a partial scholarship that left a yawning gap of $20,000. When I laid the numbers out on the table, my father's face clouded. "That is a lot of money for a degree that might not lead anywhere," he said. Weeks later, I watched my parents load Everest's boxes into the car for his full-ride football scholarship at Arizona State, heard my father clap him on the back and say, "We will contribute what we can, but with your scholarship, you should not need much." I stood on the driveway acceptance letter folded in my pocket like a secret they did not care to know. In the end, I enrolled at the local community college, worked night shifts at a cramped campus coffee shop, and bought my first real microphone piece by piece from pawn shops. That first night after registration, I sat on my thrift store bed, plugged the secondhand mic into my aging laptop, and whispered, "If no one will listen to me, I will find those who will." I did not know then that millions of people would eventually lean in to hear my voice. I only knew that my own family would not. Night after night, my world shrank to the hiss of steam from an espresso machine and the soft glow of a battered on-air sign I'd taped above my desk as a joke. At the campus coffee shop, the clock over the counter always seemed frozen around, the same time close to midnight when the rush died and the regulars went home. I would wipe down tables, refill sugar caddies, and feel ideas crowding my mind, impatient for the moment I could sit in my tiny apartment and pour them into a microphone. One evening, as the machine spat out another double shot, my boss leaned on the counter watching me with an amused half-smile. Another all-nighter. Gray Marissa asked, sliding the tip jar toward herself. "500,000 listeners do not record themselves," I replied, trying to sound casual, like it was no big deal that my once whispered thoughts now traveled to more people than lived in my hometown. She let out a low whistle. "500,000, huh? Your folks must be busting buttons." My hand stilled around the portafilter. There it was again, the assumption that success and family pride went hand in hand. They do not actually know, I admitted, eyes fixed on the dark swirl of coffee. She blinked. "What do you mean they do not know 500,000 people listen to your voice every week, and your own parents are not among them?" I shrugged. "They are busy. Everest is in his senior season at Arizona State. Every weekend they drive to Phoenix for his games." What I did not tell her was that in 2 years of me living on my own, my parents had visited my apartment exactly once, and they spent more time evaluating the security locks and the expiration date on my milk than asking about the makeshift studio in my bedroom closet. The week one of my episodes hit the charts, I forwarded my parents the link with a small burst of hope that felt almost childish. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with my mother's reply, "That is nice, honey." No mention of what she thought, no questions, just a polite pat on the head in text form. When I told Marissa, she squeezed my shoulder and said quietly, "They are lost, kid." The bell above the coffee shop door chimed, ending the conversation, but her words lingered longer than the smell of roasted beans. 3 weeks later, I was back behind the wheel of the family sedan, the desert stretching flat and endless on both sides of the highway as I drove home for Thanksgiving. A billboard loomed above the road, my brother's number plastered across it with bold letters, Arizona State Football, number 84, my brother. The gray driveway was already packed when I pulled in. Laughter and the smell of turkey sage and something buttery washed over me when I stepped inside. "There she is," Uncle Richard boomed from the living room. The career gal, still doing that little radio thing podcast I corrected automatically. And yes, my father emerged from the kitchen with a beer in his hand, clapped me on the shoulder and said, "She has a few listeners now. Hobby is taking off a bit, is it not, Soraya?" A few. The previous week, over 513,000 people had downloaded my episodes in a single day. But here, it was reduced to a hobby. I swallowed the truth like something too sharp to chew. "Where is Mom?" I asked, dropping my bag. "Upstairs. Go say hello." The staircase felt shorter than I remembered the framed photos of Everest in various jerseys lining the wall like a trophy procession. My own graduation photo was there too, smaller, hung slightly crooked, as if someone had slapped it on as an afterthought. I pushed open my old bedroom door and froze. The room I had once filled with books, notebooks, and scrap-covered bulletin boards was gone. In its place stood gleaming glass display cases holding trophies signed "Football's framed jerseys." Newspaper clippings covered the walls where my bookshelf used to be. My mother stood in the middle, dusting a large trophy. "Mom." My voice came out thin. She turned startled. "Oh, Soraya, honey, we've been meaning to tell you." Her gaze flitted nervously around the room. With Everest possibly going pro, we needed somewhere to display all his accomplishments properly. My throat tightened. "Where's my stuff?" Her hands brushed against her apron as she gestured vaguely. "In the garage, boxed up nice and neat. We figured since you have your own place now." I scanned the room, searching for any trace of myself, the spelling bee certificates, the high school journalism awards, the university paper cover I had once framed. Nothing. It was as if I had never existed here at all. You could have asked, I managed. "Well, you are never home, always working at that coffee shop, always recording your little stories." She patted my arm and forced a bright smile. "Come help with the stuffing. Everyone is waiting." Downstairs, Everest held court in the living room, surrounded by cousins hanging on his every word. He nodded at me once, then launched into another recounting of a game-winning catch. During dinner, my father rose chest-puffed as he lifted his glass. To Everest, he announced, voice booming over the clink of silverware, with NFL scouts watching his every move. "Soon we will have a real gray legacy to be proud of." Glasses lifted. People cheered. I stared at my untouched water, my phone buzzing quietly in my lap with an email that would change everything. Western Media Group. They wanted to sign my show to give me a distribution deal that could transform my small apartment project into a global platform. There was only one catch: they needed a financial reference and a co-signer for the office lease. After dinner, I found my father alone in the kitchen stacking dishes. My heart hammered as I explained the opportunity, the contract, what it could mean. "So you want me to stake my credit on this podcast thing?" he cut in his expression, cooling with each word. "Soraya, those internet radio shows are hobbies. What happens when this falls through and I am on the hook? It will not fall through," I insisted. "I have 500,000 listeners. This is my chance to—" He shook his head, already turning away. "Your brother has NFL scouts at every game. That is real opportunity. This internet stuff is not stable. When you have a real job with real prospects, then we can talk." Later that night, I sat cross-legged on the floor of my old bedroom, now a shrine to my brother, my back against a glass case holding his freshman year MVP trophy. I held my phone like a lifeline and recorded a voice memo I never planned to publish. "This is what invisibility sounds like," I whispered into the mic. "This is what it feels like when the people who should see you most clearly do not see you at all." Tears slid down my cheeks, but my voice stayed steady. They are never going to see me unless I force them to look. The next evening, back in my apartment, I took down the few family photos from my desk and slid them into a drawer. When I signed the Western Media contract, there was only one name on the dotted line, mine. I was done waiting for permission. If my family refused to believe in my voice, I would build an entire world out of it without them. The following months passed like a fever dream: contracts, late nights, endless edits. Every deal I signed was a brick in the wall I was building between myself and the family who had never believed in me. My small studio grew into an office with 6 producers, 2 interns, and a view of downtown Los Angeles. When the checks started arriving, $10,000 here, 20,000 there, I hardly noticed at first. I was too busy working, chasing deadlines, chasing something I couldn't name. But the night I deposited $200,000 in advertising revenue, I stared at the number on my phone and felt the strangest mix of triumph and grief. I had everything I once prayed for, except them. Then one evening, Marissa brought out a dusty bottle of champagne from behind the espresso machine. "You did it, kid," she said, grinning. "500,000 listeners. And now your own company. That's a story." I smiled, raising my glass. "Gray Media," I told her, letting the name roll on my tongue like a dare. 2 weeks later, I was sitting at my kitchen table drafting the email that made my hands shake. "Mom and Dad, I'm launching Gray Media next Thursday at 7 p.m. Westbrook Hotel Ballroom. It's the most important day of my life. Please come." I hit send and stared at the screen for 6 days. Nothing. Then on the morning of the launch, my phone buzzed with a single message. "Sorry, honey. Everest's playoff game tonight. Your father says to tell you good luck with your thing. Love you." I read it 3 times. Then I set the phone face down on the counter and looked at my reflection in the mirror above the sink. A woman in a tailored gray suit looked back, eyes bright with unshed tears. I applied another coat of mascara, fixed my hair, and told myself that tonight I would not need them. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers filled with the hum of 300 guests and the quiet rhythm of clinking glasses. Banners bearing the Gray Media logo hung from the walls, sleek and confident. I stood at the edge of the stage, my palms damp, my pulse a drumbeat in my ears. As the host announced my name, applause rippled through the crowd, cameras flashing like lightning. I stepped into the light. "Thank you all for coming." I began, voice steady despite the trembling in my chest. Gray Media represents a new vision for digital storytelling, one that gives a platform to voices that have been overlooked for too long. The speech flowed effortlessly, every line practiced, yet sincere. Then during the Q&A, a reporter from the Los Angeles Times raised his hand. "Miss Gray," he said, "who inspired you to start your company?" The words hit like déjà vu. My eyes flicked toward the front row to the 5 empty chairs marked with my family's names. The truth rose unbidden. Maybe I said softly it came from knowing what it feels like to be forgotten. The silence that followed was electric, charged with empathy and recognition. Cameras flashed. I saw women in the audience nodding, their eyes glistening with something that looked like understanding. By midnight, clips of that moment were already online. "Female entrepreneur delivers emotional speech on being forgotten." The phrase spread faster than I could process. At 11:42 p.m., as I kicked off my heels in my hotel room, my phone rang. "Dad." I hesitated, then answered. "Are you trying to embarrass us?" His voice roared through the line. "Your little comment is all over Twitter. Your brother's teammates are asking questions." My heart pounded, but my voice stayed calm. "Which comment, Dad?" "That nonsense about being forgotten, like we haven't supported you your whole life." I sat down on the edge of the bed, the exhaustion catching up to me. "If you feel embarrassed, maybe there's a reason." There was silence, then a scoff. "You think anyone cares about your little shows? This isn't football Soraya. This isn't real." I smiled faintly. "Millions do, Dad, just not you." The line went dead. By morning, the quote had gone viral. Maybe it came from knowing what it feels like to be forgotten. Thousands of people reposted it with messages of solidarity. My inbox overflowed with letters from women thanking me for putting their pain into words. "You spoke for me," one wrote. "My father never saw me either." When I arrived at the office that Monday, my partners were already waiting, concern etched into their faces. The board's nervous one said, "They think the family angle might be too personal." But Lucia, my lead producer, shook her head. "They're wrong. Her honesty is her power. Look at the numbers." She was right. Subscriber counts had doubled overnight. 3 major platforms called about partnerships. The Women's Media Alliance invited me to keynote their conference. For the first time, I felt the full force of what my voice could do, not despite my past, but because of it. 6 months later, I woke to find my face staring back at me from the glossy pages of Forbes, 30 Under 30, page 18. My photo captured me in the corner of my apartment, surrounded by the very recording gear I once bought secondhand. Beneath it, the caption read, "Self-made media entrepreneur Soraya Gray revolutionizes podcasting." I laughed out loud, equal parts disbelief and pride. Then my phone chimed with a new email. The sender's name froze me where I sat, grayathoughtmail.com. "We saw your interview with Terry Gross," the subject line read. My heart thudded as I opened it. "Soraya, your mother and I listened to your Fresh Air interview yesterday. You spoke well. We're proud to see a Gray making such an impression in the business world." Warmth bloomed in my chest. After all these years, finally they saw me. But then came the last paragraph. "On a personal note, Everest is going through a tough time after being cut from training camp. His son's tuition is due, and he could use some support, about $3,000 monthly until he lands on his feet. Since you're doing so well now, family should help family, right?" The warmth in my chest vanished, replaced by something cold and metallic. I closed the laptop slowly, my reflection flickering in the dark screen. Some things I realized never change. The email sat in my inbox like a ghost that refused to fade. I read it once, twice, then again, until the words blurred into static. "We're proud of you. Family should help family. For 3 years they hadn't called, not even when my company went public. And now suddenly I was useful again, not as a daughter, but as a bank account." I typed a reply carefully, every word measured. "Thank you for reaching out. I'm glad you enjoyed the interview. I'm focused on building something that matters. Hope you're both well." No mention of money, no promise. Just distance disguised as politeness. I hit send and stared at the screen until the confirmation blinked. The next morning his response arrived. Shorter, sharper. "Did you see the part about Everest's situation?" By evening there were 2 more messages. By the end of the week, 5, each more desperate than the last. "Family takes care of family. We sacrifice so much for you. Your brother needs you." I ignored them all. But when my receptionist's voice crackled through the intercom 3 days later, "Miss Gray, your brother is here." I felt the air leave my lungs. Everest filled the doorway to my office like he was still walking onto a field. Broad-shouldered, confident, but the arrogance was thinner now, worn down by something I couldn't name. "Nice digs," he said, eyes sweeping over the view of Los Angeles. "Must be nice." I gestured toward the chair across from me. "What can I do for you?" He stayed standing. "Dad's emails. You've been ignoring them." I responded to the first one, not about what matters. He started pacing his movements, restless. "You know I lost my coaching position. The program's cutting costs. Things are tight." I said quietly, "I'm sorry." His laugh was humorless. "Sorry doesn't pay bills. My kid's tuition is due next month." He turned eyes sharp now. "You've got millions of listeners, a company worth, 7 figures. You can't help out a little." The word help landed like a slap. I folded my hands on the desk, keeping my voice even. "Everest, I worked for everything I have. Alone. When I asked Dad to co-sign my lease, he said my work wasn't real. When I needed support, you all looked the other way." He stepped closer, anger flaring in his eyes. "That's different. You're a girl," I cut in. "Just the daughter." The office had gone quiet. Through the glass walls, my team pretended not to listen, but their reflection in the window betrayed them. "This isn't about that," he snapped. "This is about family." Family. My voice rose despite myself. When times got tough for me, where were you? When I was recording in a closet with pawnshop gear when I couldn't afford a studio, where was that family then? He stared at me, jaw tight. "You've always been jealous." "No," I said, standing. "I've always been invisible." He opened his mouth, but I was already walking to the door. "We're done here." His face darkened. "You'll regret this," he muttered, storming past my assistant on his way out. By that evening, my phone was lighting up with notifications. Everest Gray official family means helping each other, not pretending you're too good for them. The comments poured in, football fans defending him, strangers speculating about me. My father's number flashed on my screen 7 times. I let every call go to voicemail. At midnight, my mother left a message, her voice trembling. "Soraya, honey, family takes care of family. Your father and I gave you everything we could. Please don't turn your back on us now." I listened once, then deleted it. The next morning, 2 advertisers called saying my father had reached out to discuss concerns. He was trying to sabotage me the way parents punish disobedient children with whispers. My team gathered in the conference room before I even asked. "They're spreading rumors about you," Lucia said, sliding a printed list of inquiries across the table. "How do you want to respond?" I looked around at the faces of the people who had built this dream with me, people who saw me. "Tell them all the same thing," I said. "Gray media speaks for itself." That afternoon, my mentor called from New York. "I saw what's happening," he said. "Your brother's making noise online. Need me to step in?" "No," I replied. "Just your support." He hesitated, then said softly, "You know you're doing the right thing, don't you? Boundaries matter." The following evening, my intercom buzzed again. "Your mother's on line 1, my assistant said. My hand trembled over the button before I pressed it. "Mom." There was a pause, then her voice soft, uncertain. "Soraya, I wanted to call you myself. Your father doesn't know. That caught me off guard. That's a first." She sighed. "I'm sorry we missed your launch. I should have been there." The apology hung in the air, fragile and incomplete. "Your father doesn't understand," she went on. "Everest is angry you won't help, and I'm trying to make sense of it all. The things you said in that interview, was it really that bad?" The question hit me harder than any accusation. "Do you remember when I was 12, I asked, and you told me to be quiet because Dad and Everest were watching football highlights?" "That was just one time," she said quickly. "It was every time I replied." Silence stretched between us, heavy and unmovable. When she finally spoke, her tone had hardened. "We did our best." "Your best was reserved for Everest," I whispered. "I have a meeting now, Mom." After I hung up, my assistant poked her head in. "Your cousin called. Uncle Richard's asking questions." The cracks were forming finally after all these years. The Gray family image was beginning to fracture. That night, I stood by my apartment window, the city glowing below me. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "This isn't how Grays behave." I typed back slowly, "Then I'll be a Gray on my own terms." Then I blocked his number, and hers, and Everest's. One by one, I closed every digital door they had ever used to reach me. The silence that followed was not lonely. It was peace. A week passed before the next message came, an email with the subject line, "Your nephew misses his aunt." It was from my father. I stared at it for a long time, my pulse thrumming with the old familiar mix of dread and disbelief. "Soraya," it began. "Your mother and I were hoping you might join us for dinner next Sunday. Everest is going through a rough patch with the divorce, and his son asks about you. Don't you think you should set a good example as his aunt family takes care of family? You remember how we sacrificed for you." Sacrificed. The word almost made me laugh. I closed the email, went to make coffee, and let the hiss of the espresso machine drown out the noise in my head. Over the next few days, 3 more emails arrived, one from my mother pleading that their little boy was struggling, another reminding me that Gray family values include helping each other, and finally one from Everest himself, attaching a photo of his son holding a football captioned, "He wants to meet a successful aunt." It would have been easy to delete them all and move on, but something about that last picture, his boy's awkward smile, the familiar spark in his eyes, stuck with me. The following week, during a production meeting, my phone buzzed again. My producer, Terry, raised an eyebrow. "Family again," she asked, her tone a blend of sympathy and exhaustion. I nodded, sliding the phone face down. "They've discovered I have money," I said quietly. Terry studied me for a long moment. "You know that interview you did about family estrangement? It's trending. People connect with it. But the press is starting to ask questions about your background, your parents. They want to know why they never show up." That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by trophies and framed covers, symbols of everything I'd built, and felt a question start to form, one that wouldn't go away. What if I told the truth? Not to punish them, not to expose anyone, but to finally free myself from the burden of silence. I stared at the empty slot in my recording schedule labeled Special Content, the one I'd been saving for something important. The next evening, I turned off my phone, dimmed the lights, and powered up the microphone that had been with me since the very beginning. The red recording light blinked steadily, patient waiting. This is a special episode. I began my voice calm but weighted. Names and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy. I paused, letting the silence breathe. Today, I want to talk about what it means to be the daughter who was always loved last. For the next hour, I spoke not with anger, but with a raw honesty that felt like opening a locked door. I talked about the 12-year-old girl with the toy microphone who dreamed into a void, about the college brochures that were ignored, the bedroom that became a trophy case, the empty seats at my launch. I didn't name my father or brother. They became archetypes: a parent who couldn't see past gender, a sibling raised to believe the world owed him everything. I let the story unfold the way it had always lived inside me, shaped not by blame but by truth. When I finally stopped speaking, the silence in my apartment felt different, full alive, almost sacred. I saved the file and titled it, The Voice They Ignored. Then I pressed publish. By morning, it had 1 million downloads. By evening, 5. Within 48 hours, 10 million people had heard my story without hearing a single name. My inbox flooded with messages from women around the world. I thought I was the only one. My father never believed in me either. My brother was always the favorite. Thank you for saying what we couldn't. The comment section overflowed with grief, recognition, solidarity. It was as if all those invisible daughters had found their collective voice, and somehow it had started with mine. The first call came from Dad. His voice was tight, shaking with fury. "Take it down," he demanded. "People know you're talking about us." I leaned back in my chair, eyes on the city skyline outside my window. "Am I?" I asked softly. "I never mentioned anyone by name. Everyone will assume," he snapped. "Only if it sounds familiar," I said. "Only if it sounds like something you'd do." He hung up without another word. An hour later, my mother called. "We've always loved you, Soraya," she said, her voice quivering. "How could you say such hurtful things? I didn't say they were about you," I replied gently. Her silence stretched, and in it I heard everything she couldn't admit. Everest texted next, "Real family doesn't air dirty laundry." I didn't bother responding. By the end of the week, national outlets had picked up the story, the untold truth behind Gray Media's founder. America's forgotten daughters speak out. For once, the attention wasn't about scandal, it was about resonance. The audience didn't see bitterness. They saw bravery. At work, my staff moved with quiet purpose, understanding now why our company's mission mattered. Lucia brought me coffee and said simply, "Now they know why you built this place." I nodded, the weight in my chest easing for the first time in years. A few days later, my analytics dashboard updated. The episode had become the most listened-to piece of content we had ever produced. 10 million downloads, 50,000 comments, stories from daughters, sisters, mothers, each echoing the same pain, the same strength. For the first time, I realized the silence that once defined me had become my superpower. That night, I received an email from a 16-year-old girl. "How do I find my voice when no one in my family wants to hear it?" she wrote. I stared at the message for a long time before answering. "Start by whispering," I wrote back. "Then speak a little louder each day. The right people will listen, even if they aren't the ones you were born to." When I hit send something inside me finally settled. The family, who had ignored my voice for 28 years, could listen with the rest of the world or not at all. For the first time, their choice didn't matter anymore. 3 years passed. The noise of fame faded, replaced by a quieter rhythm, the kind you earn after fighting for your place in the world. My apartment in downtown Los Angeles had become a sanctuary of sorts, sunlight spilling across a wall lined with awards-framed magazine covers and first editions of books written by women whose voices I'd helped amplify. Gray Media now occupied the top floor of a glass building, 6 blocks away, home to 15 shows and 50 million monthly downloads. The world finally listened, but the silence inside me felt different now. It wasn't the hollow ache of being unseen. It was peace. That morning, the city was wrapped in gold light when my phone chimed with a new email notification. The sender's name made my breath catch. From Tyler Gray, Everest's son. I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. I hesitated before opening it. "Dear Aunt Soraya," it began. "I'm 12 now. I listened to your podcast about invisible daughters. I think I understand why you don't talk to my dad anymore. Our family treated you badly. I want to be different. Could we meet just us?" For a moment, I could almost hear my father's voice in that same old tone, soft when he wanted something, stern when he didn't. My first instinct was to delete the email. The Gray pattern had always been the same: reach out, only when they needed something. But Tyler was 12. Just a boy. I typed a reply before I could overthink it. "Sure. There's a coffee shop near my office. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. Come with your mom if she wants." He showed up alone. The bell over the cafe door jingled softly as he stepped inside, all long limbs and shy energy, clutching a small box wrapped in Sunday comics. When he spotted me, he smiled hesitantly and made his way over. "Hi," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Dad doesn't know I'm here." I nodded toward the seat across from me. "Then let's make this our secret." He pushed the box toward me, the paper wrinkling under his nervous fingers. "Mom helped me find this," he said. "She said you might want it back." I peeled away the newspaper wrapping, and the breath left my lungs. Inside lay a cracked plastic toy microphone, its once silver paint dulled with time, a strip of yellowing tape holding it together. My initials SG still carved into the side with a safety pin. For a second, I wasn't in that coffee shop. I was 12 again, sitting cross-legged on my bedroom floor, whispering into this very toy, while football commentary thundered downstairs. "Where did you find this?" I asked, my voice unsteady. "Mom found it in Grandpa's garage when they were cleaning," he said. "She told me it was yours." He looked at me earnestly. "I listened to all your shows. The one about invisible daughters made me cry. Dad never talks about you. But sometimes I hear him and Grandpa arguing about you when they think I'm playing video games." Something inside me cracked, not the kind of break that hurts, but the kind that lets the light in. "Thank you for bringing this," I said softly. "You have no idea what it means." He fidgeted with his straw, then looked up at me, his voice small but steady. "Can I ask you something? How did you know your voice mattered when nobody listened?" The question hit with a precision I knew too well. It was the same question I'd asked myself my entire childhood. I reached across the table and took his hand, the gesture instinctive. I didn't know I said honestly. I just knew that if I stopped speaking, I'd disappear completely. So I kept going, even when no one cared. He hesitated, then whispered, "Dad says I should play football, but I'd rather write stories." His eyes darted up, searching for disapproval. I smiled. "You don't have to be like anyone else, Tyler. You just have to listen to yourself. Tell the truth. That's all any voice really needs." His face lit up, relief and hope blooming all at once. "Could you teach me how to record stories?" he asked. "When you're ready, I promised. I'll teach you." Later that evening, I placed the broken microphone on my bookshelf between my Peabody Award and the framed Forbes feature. The contrast made me laugh, a child's toy beside symbols of success, but it felt right. The beginning beside the culmination. I picked up my personal recorder, the one I used for private reflections, and pressed the red button. My voice filled the quiet room. "Not every wound needs an apology to heal," I said softly. Sometimes the greatest freedom comes from realizing how strong the silence made you. I paused the city's hum steady outside my window, and sometimes healing arrives through the ones who watched and chose to be better. My phone buzzed on the table.